Flower gardening by the colonists in the New World began slowly. You know, they just didn't have time for pleasurable hobbies. But they did bring seeds from hollyhock, Canterbury bells, and primrose and incorporated them into their vegetable and herb gardens. Yvonne Barcelona brought the look of an old-fashioned flower garden into her quilt. Oh, there's wisteria hanging from a vine across the top of her garden lattice, and then calla lilies grow from a clay pot, and red tea roses wind their way up from the bottom of the lattice. It's just so pretty. And resting by the pot is Kiki, her pet Sheltie. Well, Yvonne used paperback fusing to hold her intricate flowers in place, and then she stitched them down around the outside edges. This is fun. Now she shaded the sky from light at the top down to dark at the very bottom. It's just beautiful. Well, did you know that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were avid gardeners? Well, they imported seeds that snapdragons, poppies, and carnations. Well, all of those flowers are here in this quilt. Just looks like pathways in an English flower garden with its planned lattice blocks set on point. And then the two different greens in the lattice just tie all of the flowers together. It's just beautiful. Teresa did this one. Well, Sue Bouchard made her garden bright and beautiful with parrots hanging around the coconut tree. It's just so colorful. And the flamingo looks just so content among the vibrant tropical flowers. Well, she put her jungle into place with paperback fusing as well. And Sandy Thompson free motion stitched around the raw edges. Well, I found this antique quilt just very similar to the garden lattice. The quilt maker made each block with identical triangles. It's just so charming. It has stripes and feed sack prints. Well, we took that concept from the antique quilt and we just sewed this little 4-block quilt together. It goes so fast. Also using identical triangles for each quarter. Gardening is now the #1 hobby in America. Statistics show that 48% of the quilters also just love gardening. Well, I know 100% of you will enjoy making the garden lattice quilt. So join me. This quilt will really grow on you. My sister Patty, Teresa, and I just sewed up 9 lattice blocks. Then we took Patty's flower fabric, cut it all up, sent it off to Cousin Carol Ann, and she did all of the stitching on all of those flowers. Free motion stitching. I just love the way the stitching winds up along. Looks like the fragrance coming right out of the flowers. Now, for 1 block, you need to have 2 lattice strips. They're both 1.5 inches wide. This is lattice number 1, always the lighter. Number 2, always the darker. And you need to have 4 6-inch squares. Now these will be cut on one diagonal so that when you make a scrappy block for the garden, you're actually going to end up with 8 different triangles to make the block. This is what the scrappy block for the quilt looks like. Reproduction fabric's really cute. And if you're doing the identical blocks, you need to have 4 6-inch squares and then those 2 lattice pieces. Well, when you sew those lattice strips together, this is really pedal to the metal. It's my favorite kind of sewing. You can just sit and really fly on it. Take and place lattice number 2, your darkest lattice, always on the right, your lightest on the left. Flip them right sides together. It is that good old 1/4 inch seam and 15 stitches to the inch. And when I sew strips together, I like to do almost as if I'm using a serger. You know, you could really use a serger on this, but take your fingers and line them up out here, especially with that 1/4 inch foot that I have on my machine. I can just sit and power those strips right through, one after the other. Now once you have them sewn, have some already done over here. Use a pressing mat with lines on them because, ooh, If you're like me, you hate those bowed strips. So use the line on your pressing mat, press it straight along here, set your seams first, and then go back. Just open that darkest one, always on the top. With your fingers, open it up so that you can press right in there. Do like to use steam so that the seam is behind the darkest lattice. You know, I'm going to tell you specific pressing instructions throughout this, and you are going to love it because every seam in this block locks together. Okay, once you have your seams pressed towards the darkest, take it and fold it in half. Doesn't matter if it's right side or wrong sides together. In half, one more time, and then one more time again. So you literally have this folded up so that it's approximately 5.5 inches wide. Just steam the ends, both sides, do them good. And then you're creating a match point here on the strip. You want to create another match point on your triangles. So take 2 squares, that'll be good. Fold them corner to corner and just steam press a crease in here. We're going to use the creases on both of these pieces so that whenever you square them up, you have perfect square up pieces. Okay, so let's just take this and we'll keep it closed. Take the 6.5 inch triangle square up ruler, find the 45 going right down through that 45-degree line, match it here, here, cut it in half so that this is what you have. 2 triangles with those match points right down through the middle. Those are good creases. And when you open this one up, you should have 7 match points. Okay, well, let me just take this one out. This is for finishing up this quilt later. Okay, place your strip with lattice number 2 under your needle. It's always on the right. And then take your triangles with their match points in them and line up that crease on the triangle with the strip. Flip it right sides together. Ooh, you've got a lot of extra in between. Use your stiletto to match up those edges. Power through there, pedal to the metal. And when you get to the next crease, go ahead and skip it, but add the next triangle. Let me show you. I'll go a little bit further. Right down here I have a crease, and on the triangle and on the strip. Right sides together. You're actually going to get 4 triangles going right down this side. Now if you're doing scrappy, each one is going to be different. If you're doing identical, they'll all be the same. Well, I already have one ready to go on. So take your strip, place the triangles on the top, set the seams, open and press so that the seam is behind the triangle. And ooh, if you can, try to keep those crease marks in there. It's going to go a lot better in the next step so that seams are behind the triangle. Now, let me just get this. Boy, I'm going to have a lot to finish up in just a minute. Take this strip and place it so that the light is now on the right. And once again, just grab those triangles. And it's easy to see now. Here's the crease here. When you flip it right sides together to it, you can line up the creases straight through. And so 4 triangles right down this side. And I'm going to just do this one because I want to show you how to square up this piece. Because now those crease marks that we left out before come into play. Take your cutter and your ruler, right here's that crease, and just cut it. So you will literally cut this into 4 pieces. Now, place it on your pressing mat with the lightest strip on the top. This is a little different this time. Set the seam with the lightest strip on the top, open and press right into it. Because when you turn it over, you now have the seams all going in one direction. That's important because you want these seams to all lock together. You use a small cutting mat, one that you can just rotate around, something that's about 12 inches square. Place your block right in the center and use your 6.5-inch square up ruler again. Place that diagonal line right down through that seam. Center it on there. Make sure you have fabric sticking out on all the edges. And if you're right-handed, you trim up the right side and across the top. If you're left-handed, you're going to do it completely the opposite. Take those two sides, get rid of them. Don't even move a thing, but turn your mat around. And then just trim up 2 remaining sides, right and across the top. And you are going to have the most perfect looking quarter you've ever seen. Well, let me finish up my other pieces and I'll show you how to sew the whole block together. It's no secret this garden is going together. Well, when you place your 4 quarters, pay attention to your number 2 lattice. And I always think of the right half with the lattice, the dark lattice, as down because it's down here and down here. And then think of the left half as the dark lattice on the top, on the top. You'll get it right then. Okay, take these pieces on the right and flip them onto the left. And it is pretty amazing because all 3 seams lock together right here. You can see that each one is pressed in the opposite direction on the top half, and it is exactly the same thing on the bottom half. Every single one opposite direction. Okay, now we are really going to need the stiletto for this one. So start up at the top. Just match up those top pieces. You can back stitch on the outside edge, but just anchor it, and then once you anchor it, go down to these seams and look at them, roll them into each other, and literally line them up. Once you line them up, hold them flat with the stiletto. That's the first one, then go to the second one, fold it back. You can see that you can roll it right in there. Feel it. It's really great if you learn to just wiggle match those seams and actually get a feel for when they're locking together. Okay, take the second half, open it up, roll it into each other, feel it, wiggle it. I would take my thumb and my finger underneath and just pull them together. Now once those are locked, assembly line sew them very closely right behind the other. And I'm just picking that up. I can see it. I can feel it. Use the stiletto to match those outside edges. You know, I timed myself and I can do a whole block in 20 minutes. That's not bad at all. Goes really quick. Okay, when you open it up and you check out the center, this is when you know it's right, when you have that 1/4 inch from the outside edge, the raw edge, into that matching point. Should be in both areas. So take these 2, flip them right sides together, and now this seam goes up. And this is important. This seam is going to go up, and what's underneath is going to go down. And you create this great stitching that you can see. You're supposed to cross right over that little V, and you'll see how it lines up. Well, I'll find out how good I am. Now, you can make a great wall hanging with just 4 blocks or a 9 block. The 9 block is what's on the wall behind me. If you'd like to make a lap robe, how about 12 blocks? A twin size has 24 blocks. A double queen has just 42, and a king has 49 blocks. Okay, I'm going to take this right here, hold this up, whoops, get that stiletto, and stitch right across there. Get this block laid out, match those points, and just keep sewing right down along. Hold these outside edges. You know, from this point on, there is no more squaring up. Now, I'm going to look first, and then I'll decide if I'm going to show you. We'll find out. All right, you can just take a good close look at that. Perfect, right in the center. And now I want to show you even one more step that'll help with your matches, because we can completely make this center lay flat. Okay, the connecting stitch right here, the vertical one going up and down, is just clipped like that. And then with your stiletto, there's about 3 vertical stitches you can pick out. 1, 2, 3 on one side. Ooh, let me get that one. It's just fussing. One side, turn it over, and you can see how that V crosses over, so that's really perfect. You've got 3 more stitches right there to unsew. And then take your block, lay it wrong side up, And with your finger, just work it in there and just mush it so that you create this pinwheel right in the very center that looks like that. And then you press around that center. You swirl your seams. You lay the block flat, swirl right here, push it around from the center. Keep all the other seams pressed exactly as you did, and then just give it one good press on the right side. Create that little pinwheel effect in the center and press from the right side. And then once you have your blocks all done, you can go ahead, lay them out. This is just a 4-block wall hanging, creating that effect. And when you sew these seams together, they will also lock. Well, the lattice is built. Now I know it doesn't miter. Any scraps sewn together look beautiful. Well, this is my garden quilt, and I'm going to have the lattice on 3 sides, miter just 2 corners, and then the bottom has a 3.5-inch base strip sewn onto it. Well, this is my quilt, and it's going to have lattice on all 4 corners. It's going to have little dots on each one of those for perfect miters. Well, let me show you how to do it. Take a permanent marking pen and put a dot 1/4 inch in from the corner. It can be a small dot, so just you can see it, but that's my dot right there. And once you have your dot in, do both corners on your garden, all 4 on your quilt. Take your strip and make sure it's at least 4 inches longer from each miter. Then take your pin, put it 1/4 inch in, and match 1/4 inch in right underneath. And then that is your starting point. You actually want to match up the bottom and cut it even on the garden. Well, on the quilt, I've already done it, so I want to show you. I already have that 1/4 inch loose right there. I did the 2 sides first, and then down here, I folded the side out, and now I've got the bottom going, so that when you fold that back, you see that whole 1/4 inch loose. Well, I want to show you how to take this piece and do the mitering. I like to work at the pressing mat and get it all laid out in good order before I go on. So just put your corner right down there, and they're both pressed out. Take the top lattice and fold it under and up on the diagonal. You want to get a nice 45-degree line. Oh, great. And you can see how you've got that corner all lined up perfectly. Once you have that folded under, then just take some steam, set it down, and then I'm just going to very carefully fold that back, and with a pin, just take right through that seam. There's a seam right here. Going to go right underneath and pin, so I've got it lined up. Well, we are going to see how this miter turns out. Now all I have to do is just sew on that pressed in fold, and I'm just going to start on the outside edge in. You know, I do like to use the locking stitch on my sewing machine whenever I put in those little dots when I start and stop. Let me fold that back completely out of the way. I'm going to just stitch right on this line and stop right here at the dot. I'm just going to use my locking stitch. It's just going to go up and down, lock in place. Before I trim, I am going to check it. Boy, I just don't want to have any crooked miters here. Cut those threads off, and then just look from the right side. Oh, that looks good. So just finish it off by trimming 1/4 inch away. Boy, my threads are just trailing along with me. Line your ruler up with that 1/4 inch line. Trim that away, and then this just gets pressed open and laid flat. Just cut off those little tips, and that'll finish your miter. I finished the miters on my corners, and then I added the 4.5 inch borders on my garden quilt on 3 sides. Well, now comes the fun part, the flowers. I selected roses, very large roses that are approximately 5 inches across. Now, this is the part where the fabric was cut from the bolt, and so I just rough cut around it, making sure that I wanted to include all of the parts, and now I'm just going to place and plan. So that would look good right in that corner. Here's another part of the rose that was cut right from the bolt. It has a straight edge across the bottom, so it works well across there. And then I'm just going to keep on rough cutting and placing. This is when a design wall really becomes helpful. You can stand back and take a look at it. Now, this is a smaller scale rose, and I actually put paperback on that, paperback fusing. I cut the rose in half, put half on each side so it looks like it's just winding around that lattice. Well, let me destroy this because I have roses everywhere. Let me show you how it's all coming together. There's a couple of different ways that you can do the roses, and I'll show you the finished look, the pros and the cons. Now, personally, I like to use this light to medium weight fusible interfacing on the back because I can stuff it. It has finished raw edges, and then once it's stuffed, you can go back and do some free motion machine quilting with your darning foot, your feed dogs down, and just outline stitch around that rose. Or, if you want, you could put just fabric on the back. Now, I'm working on another quilt. I can't wait to finish it. It has pears on it. Now, these are just going to dangle loose, and so that's why I put the fabric on the back. Or you can use the easiest one, which is the paperback fusing. So I'll start with that one. Now, you just take your paperback fusing, put your wrong side of your fabric against the sticky side of the fusing, and you can use a press, an electronic press, or you can use an iron, and you just want to do that 2 to 3 seconds. It doesn't take long, and then that's just going to go ahead and stick on the wrong side. And then once you go ahead and trim it around the outside edge like this, then you just peel back the paper. It's got this fusing on the back, so you can position it and then fuse it back down about 3 to 5 seconds to hold it in place. Now, you can also get a fusing that I think really is great too. It has 2 paper sides, but you peel the one paper away, put the wrong side of the fabric on here, and you just rub with your hands so it sticks on the back, and then you can actually just peel that paper away and move this piece around before you fuse it down finally. Well, now for the light to medium weight non-woven fusible interfacing, you put the bumpy side up, you put the right side of the fabric, right sides together to it, and then you just stitch around the outline. And if you can't quite see what you're supposed to be stitching, if you take a permanent marking pen and on the wrong side just draw around at first what you want to stitch, then you can go back and stitch on the line. Use a small stitch, use about 18 stitches or 20 stitches to the inch. Now, Orion made this leaf for me already. It's just a small leaf, but he stitched on the line around the outside edge, and then you just go back and trim 1/8 inch away. Let me just cut this off right here. This stuff you can just get rid of. And then it's quite simple to turn. You just cut a hole right in the center of the back. And then I like to use a straw and a bodkin. Oh, these are the best tools. All you do is just really cut a straw in half, put it right in here like this, turn the fabric so that it's on the end of the straw. You just push it right in there. When you pull it out, it's right side out. And then all you have to do is just do another turn. And actually, you might have some little points that you want to pull out with your stiletto. Run your bodkin around in the inside there. Take this, pull out those points, make them nice and sharp how you want them, and then take your wooden iron, press from the outside edge like that. Make it good. And then I cut some 100% cotton batting that's just exactly the same size, and you can use your Hemostats and just go ahead and stuff all of those pieces, move that around, and then it'll be ready to fuse down. Well, I have a piece that's all set, ready to go, And all you do, once you know how you want to position this, just take your rows that you've all prepared your flower, line it up across the bottom, and then just fuse it in place. And then continue. Go ahead and add all of the rest of the flowers going up the vine. Next comes your fourth border, your 4.5-inch border, and then put some roses on top of them. You will have a beautiful garden.